All right, let's dive into this deep dive about Palantir. They've been kind of all over the news with their stock, like taking off lately.
Yeah, they've been on a tear.
14% jump on August 6th, right after those Q2 earnings. So the big question is this real or is it just hype?
Right.
Are they actually onto something big or is this, just a temporary bump?
Yeah.
And to figure that out, we're going deep. We've got analyst reports, Deutsche Bank, Mizuho, Goldman Sachs. Those are always interesting. We got Palantir's own Q2 report, of course. Oh, and we even found this independent analysis that's looking at their potential in, get this, the manufacturing sector.
Manufacturing, interesting.
Right, so we're going to unpack all of this, see if we can separate the signal from the noise.
I'm in. Let's do it. I think what really caught my eye right off the bat is how different Palantir's been doing compared to, the rest of the software industry.
Right.
It's been a mixed bag for a lot of companies, but Palantir's standing out, that's for sure.
Oh, okay, so let's dig into these impressive Q2 numbers. Revenue's up, beating expectations, operating margins, way better than their guidance, and they've now had 6 quarters in a row of being GAAP profitable.
Okay.
Which, for anyone who doesn't speak accountant, basically means they're making money, like actually making money.
Yeah.
And for a company that's been, seen as kind of a risky bet in the past.
Yeah. Risky is putting it mildly.
This is a big deal.
For sure. I mean, it does seem like they're finally starting to silence those critics, at least for now. But let's not forget, Palantir's had, shall we say, a colorful past. Their pricing has raised eyebrows, and there's always been this question of, can they really break into the mainstream business world? So, yeah, these wins are great, but the real test is if they can keep this up. Sustained growth, that's the key.
So speaking of sustained growth, let's talk about what everyone's buzzing about these days.
AI.
AI. It's everywhere you look.
Right, and Palantir's all over this, especially with this new warp speed platform they're pushing, which they claim is an AI operating system designed to, supercharge manufacturing efficiency.
Okay, supercharged, that's a bold claim.
It does sound pretty impressive, but is it all it's cracked up to be? Is it just hype, or is there something real here?
Well, the manufacturing world has heard this song before, haven't they?
Right. Software's been promising to revolutionize manufacturing for, decades, and it's been a mixed bag at best. It's funny, you think about a company like SpaceX, they actually built their own ERP system from scratch, because they didn't think any of the existing solutions were up to snuff. So the big question is, can Palantir, with this warp speed thing, actually deliver where others have failed?
It's a big question, and one we're definitely going to keep digging into. But before we get too far down that rabbit hole, let's talk about this balance Palantir has between its government clients and its commercial clients. They've always been super tight with government contracts, but lately we're seeing some movement on the commercial side. What's the story there?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. There's this, and it's mostly whispers at this point, but there's talk about a potential shift in how the U.S. government approaches defense spending.
Okay, tell me more.
The rumor is they're going to move away from this traditional hardware focus and start investing heavily in, you guessed it, software solutions. Now, if this turns out to be true, this could be huge for a company like Palantir, especially given their, shall we say, cozy relationship with certain government agencies.
Speaking of different perspectives, we've got these analyst reports, and they don't seem to agree on what all this means for Palantir's future.
No.
Deutsche Bank, for example, they just set a price target of $21 for the stock, which seems kind of, hesitant.
Hesitant, yeah.
Especially when you compare it to Goldman Sachs. They bumped their target up to $16.
So why the difference? What are they seeing?
Right.
It's almost like they're looking at two different companies. Deutsche Bank, they're definitely paying attention to how the stock market's been reacting, the momentum, but they seem a little wary. They're not quite ready to go all in on Palantir for the long term, at least not yet.
Yeah, they're kind of like, prove it.
Exactly. Whereas Goldman Sachs, they seem to be fully on board the Palantir train.
Really?
That higher price target suggests they think Palantir's got what it takes to ride this AI wave, become a major player in the enterprise AI world.
Interesting.
It's a classic short-term versus long-term perspective thing.
Totally.
And the thing is, Palantir's not just talking the talk. They're putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah.
Big investments in R&D, expanding that sales force, especially on the commercial side, which tells you they're playing the long game here. For sure. And those investments don't come cheap.
No, they don't.
Investors need to realize, as Palantir's spending to grab more market share, their short-term profitability might take a hit. But hey, that's the game, right? High risk, high reward.
No risk, no reward.
Exactly.
Speaking of risks, let's go back to this warp speed thing and their plans for manufacturing. I mean, they're basically saying they've cracked the code for using AI to make manufacturing way more efficient.
Yeah, and that's a bold statement.
It really is. And this independent analysis we dug up, it really breaks down the challenges here. See, the manufacturing world, much like government agencies, they've got very specific needs.
Right.
It's not one size fits all. And those pre-packaged software solutions, they haven't always delivered.
Not even close.
So is Palantir seriously claiming they found some kind of magical one-size-fits-all AI solution?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? From what I'm seeing, it's more like they're presenting warp speed as this flexible platform that you can tailor to each company's individual needs.
Oh, I see.
So it's less like a pre-built house, more like a set of really high-tech building blocks that you can use to like construct your own custom AI-powered factory.
So they're giving manufacturers the tools to build their own solutions.
Exactly. And this is where their experience with like really messy real-world data, all that stuff they learned from those government contracts, it could give them a real edge.
That makes sense. I mean, they're used to dealing with complicated situations.
Right, not just some idealized scenario in a lab somewhere.
So maybe all that government work was the perfect training for this whole enterprise AI thing.
Could be. But there's a big difference between customizing solutions for a handful of high-profile clients and then scaling those solutions to thousands of businesses, all different industries.
Yeah, it's a huge leap.
Yes!
Which brings us to a very important metric. Net dollar retention rate.
Catchy.
I know, right? But basically, it tells us how good Palantir is at keeping their customers happy and, more importantly, how good they are at growing those relationships.
So are they just a one-hit wonder, or can they build something sustainable?
That's the question. And speaking of sustainability, their Q2 report did mention a few interesting things about this warp speed. Apparently, there's some serious money being thrown around already.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, they highlighted this initial order, $154 million for a warp speed project with the U.S. government, and apparently it could grow to almost $500 million over 5 years.
Okay, that's nothing to sneeze at.
No, it's not. It tells you somebody, somewhere, with some deep pockets, believes in what Palantir's building.
For sure. But they're still being pretty secretive about how warp speed actually works.
Right. Yeah, they're playing it close to the chest for now.
Of course.
But there are these little hints in the report.
Like what?
Well, they keep mentioning this thing called ontology technology.
Ontology.
Yeah, it sounds complicated, but basically it's about structuring data, organizing it in a way that makes it easier for the AI algorithms to actually understand and use to make decisions.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about having powerful AI. It's about making sure the AI actually has good data to work with.
Exactly.
Like you can have the fanciest kitchen in the world, but if you don't have any ingredients, you're not cooking anything.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, we don't have any concrete examples of warp speed in action yet.
They're keeping it under wraps.
Top secret. Speaking of secrets, let's go back to those analyst reports for a sec. We talked about the price targets, but it's worth understanding why they're so different, don't you think?
Yeah, what's the logic there?
Right. So Deutsche Bank, with their more conservative $21, they seem to be taking a show-me approach. They see the strong start to the year, the hype around AI, but they're hesitant. Like they're not convinced Palantir's really cracked the code yet.
They want proof.
Exactly. And then you've got Goldman Sachs with their more bullish outlook and that $16 price target. They seem much more optimistic about Palantir's chances in the long run. They're particularly high on their ability to capitalize on what they call medium-term enterprise AI engagements.
Medium-term enterprise AI engagements. What does that even mean?
Basically, they're betting on Palantir's ability to lock down these big long-term contracts with companies that are looking to implement AI solutions over the next few years.
Okay, I'm following.
And Goldman Sachs specifically called out Palantir's strengths in 3 areas: structuring data, upgrading IT infrastructure, and developing custom AI applications. They see these as their secret weapons.
So it's not just about the AI itself, it's about the whole package.
It's like they're saying, Palantir, they're not just an AI company, they're a problem-solving company that happens to be really good at AI.
They're not afraid to get their hands dirty.
Exactly. And honestly, that's kind of refreshing in the AI world. It can feel very theoretical sometimes, all these flashy demos. But Palantir, they're out there building real-world solutions for really complex problems.
Yeah, that's a good point. But building those solutions, especially at scale, it takes money. Right.
It does.
And Palantir's had, let's say, a history of being expensive to run.
Yeah, their operating costs have always been high.
So while the profitability they're showing now is great, the real question is, can they keep that up as they grow?
Right, because those R&D costs, the sales force expansion, all that eats into profits.
Exactly. It's a balancing act, and they've got to maintain that balance as they go after a bigger slice of the pie.
Absolutely. And speaking of bigger slices of pie, what about that commercial market? We've talked about their growth there, but is it the real deal? Can they really transition from being the government's go-to to becoming a major player in the business world?
Yeah, can they crack the commercial code? That's the question. I mean, their Q2 report did show a 35% year-over-year growth in U.S. commercial revenue, which isn't bad at all.
No, that's not bad.
But you got to remember, that growth, it's starting from a pretty small base.
Right, so they're making progress, but they've still got a long way to go.
A long way. And that brings us back to customer acquisition costs, or CAC. How much does it cost them to get a new customer? And more importantly, how quickly can they start making money off that new customer? Now, their report did mention a customer acquisition cost payback period of less than a year.
Less than a year. That's pretty good.
It is. It means they're making their money back on those new clients relatively quickly, which is a positive sign.
It suggests their sales and marketing efforts are getting more efficient.
Exactly, which is huge for a company that's trying to grow. But, like we said earlier, we need to see this trend continue over multiple quarters before we get too excited.
Sustainability.
Sustainability. That's the name of the game. Oh, but there was this one other thing in the report I think is pretty important.
Okay, what is it?
Remember how we were talking about that potential shift in the U.S. government's defense spending? Away from hardware, more towards software.
Yeah, the whole software is eating the world thing, but in the military.
Exactly. Well, Palantir, they seem to be banking on this. They actually included some numbers in their report. Get this, the U.S. Army, right now, they're only dedicating something like 0.015% of their entire budget for 2024 to command and control software.
Seriously, that's tiny.
I know, right?
That's minuscule.
But Palantir, they see this as a huge opportunity. To them, this tiny budget, it's not a sign of disinterest, it's a sign that things are about to change, like the dam's about to break.
And they're ready to ride that wave.
They're ready, especially with warp speed. So, to bring it all back, it seems like Palantir's betting big on two things: AI taking over the world and software becoming even more crucial for the military.
High risk, high reward, like we were saying.
Exactly. And their success all comes down to whether they can actually handle both of these trends, which is no easy task.
No, it's not. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, but that's what makes this whole deep dive so interesting.
Oh, for sure. So if we had to sum it all up for our listener, after all this, the analyst reports, Palantir's own statements, this independent analysis, what's the verdict? Is Palantir really riding the wave of the future? Or are they just really good at marketing?
It's a tough one, isn't it? I mean, that's the thing about these deep dives. You often end up with more questions than answers. But one thing's for sure, Palantir's not just some fly-by-night company chasing the latest trend.
Well,
They've got real capabilities honed through years of working with the government on some seriously complex stuff. And that just might give them a real advantage when it comes to this whole enterprise AI game.
yeah, they've got the experience, they've got the tech, and it seems like they've got the money now, too.
Right. But as we've been saying, there are still challenges, a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Can they keep innovating? Can they adapt? And most importantly, can they actually deliver real value to their customers, both in government and in the business world?
Those are the big questions. And honestly, no one knows the answers yet, not even Palantir.
That's what makes it so interesting, though.
Right. It's a nail biter for sure. And that brings us to this independent analysis we keep mentioning. This is the one that really digs into Palantir's chances in manufacturing, which, let's be honest, is not their usual playground.
Right.
They call it a bet on the future, which, based on everything we've talked about, seems pretty accurate. What do you make of their take? Well, the thing that really stood out to me was how this analysis connects their potential in manufacturing back to, like, their core philosophy. Palantir has always been obsessed with understanding data at a really deep level, how it's organized, how it all fits together. And it seems like that's a big part of warp speed, too.
So they're not just like throwing AI at the problem and hoping for the best.
No, not at all. They're actually doing the hard work of building a foundation.
Right, because you need that solid foundation for AI to really work.
Absolutely.
But even with a strong foundation, this analysis isn't like sugarcoating things.
No.
They're clear about the challenges.
Oh, yeah, for sure. They basically say, look, Palantir's only going to succeed here if they can show manufacturers real, tangible results.
Right. Bottom line
Sure.
results.
Exactly. It's not enough to have the coolest tech. They've got to prove that their tech actually helps these companies make more money, be more efficient. Manufacturers, they're practical.
They want to see those robots working overtime.
Exactly. But like we were saying earlier, scaling those solutions from like niche applications to widespread use, that's a whole different ballgame.
It's a huge jump. So where does that leave us? We've thrown a lot of information at our listener today. What should they be taking away from all this when it comes to Palantir and their future?
Well, I think the big takeaway from this analysis is focus on the specifics. Look for those real-world examples where Palantir's already making a difference.
Don't get caught up in the hype cycle.
Exactly. Look past the marketing and see how the technology is actually being used and what the real impact is.
It's about separating the signal from the noise.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, the question isn't whether AI is the future of manufacturing. It's whether Palantir can actually deliver on that promise.
Can they walk the walk, not just talk the talk?
Right.
And that's a question for the ages, really. I mean, this deep dive, we can't predict the future, obviously. But we have, hopefully, given our listener a better understanding of what's going on here.
Yeah.
The potential, the risks, the challenges. And the thing is, Palantir, they're a company that seems to like tackling these big, complicated problems.
Sure. They like to push the boundaries.
They do. Whether that works out for them, well, only time will tell.
Exactly.
But one thing's for sure, they're going to be interesting to watch.
They're definitely not boring. That's the one thing you can say about Palantir.
No, they're not boring at all. So for our listeners who are now hopefully as fascinated by Palantir as we are, what should they be paying attention to? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think keeping an eye on how they do in the manufacturing space is going to be really telling.
Right. See if they can actually gain some traction there.
Exactly. And don't just read the headlines, dig into the details.
Do your own research.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because in a world that's just overflowing with information, being able to think critically, being able to sort through all of that, that's the most valuable skill you can have.
Couldn't agree more. All right, well, on that note, until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
And we'll be right here with you, diving into the next big thing.
That's right. We'll see you next time.